Hi, I'm Sanjukta Sharma. Welcome to the Slow Fix. So today we're talking about the gut. So I know you know a lot about the gut already from your wellness and health influencers and how important it is to take care of our gut, how transformative gut health can be to our overall wellness. So part of the studies around the gut that's going on around the world is the specific field called psychobiotics. And Professor John Cryan, who I had the opportunity to meet at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Mumbai recently, is one of the leading experts in this field where, he studies the connection of the gut with our brain, how we feel, what our moods are, even some of our social behaviors. So his book sort of unpacks a lot of case studies, a lot of research, a lot of the science of it. And in this interview, he sort of unpacks all of it in a language that all of us can understand. So let's get into it. Let's get to know more about the gut and find out how it can sort of make us better at our social interactions, better at being ourselves. Professor John Cryan, thank you so much for joining me today. Such interesting work. This is something we are still not introduced to, I think, the Psychobiotic Revolution, the mood, food, and the new science of the gut-brain connection. So, the microbiome in the gut, we are hearing a lot of it nowadays, especially on the internet, right? And science is becoming a little more accessible, thankfully. So I'll ask you something very sort of basic and brief first. Can you explain very simply what is the gut microbiome and what does it do in the human body?
Sure. So our gut microbiome is a catch-all phrase for the trillions of microorganisms that we have in and on our bodies, and in particularly in our gut. They include bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other organisms that get forgotten, like archaea as well. They play a critical role in almost all aspects of our health. And there's been a revolution over the last 2 decades once we could start to actually quantify these microbes through advances in technology, that we could actually see what's there and what they're doing. We began to understand that they're playing a critical role in digestion, of course, in providing core nutrients to the body, in informing our developing immune system, having an impact on cardiometabolic health. Even now we're beginning to see that they can impact how cancer treatments might actually work. But in my area, it's the area I'm a neuroscientist. What we've shown is that they also play a role in helping to shape brain and behavior across the lifespan.
What really led you to this field, if you can tell us? And tell us some of the findings. It's a very new subject. We know that our bowel movements are related to our gut, but how we feel and how we behave and that the gut's relationship to that is something new. So tell us about it, a little bit about your journey and your research.
Of course. Yeah. So you say new, but yet all we have to do is look to our language. We use phrases like gut feelings, gut instincts. When we're disappointed, we're gutted. When we make brave moves, they're gutsy moves. When we're nervous, we've butterflies in our tummy. So we have forever been personifying our emotions in our gut. But what is new is now our understanding of how this might actually work, and that there might be an underlying biology to it. So my journey with the microbes is an interesting one. I'm a stress neurobiologist, and I'm interested in stress-related disorders, including depression and anxiety, and I've spent my whole career trying to understand how the brain responds to stress and how the body responds to stress, because stress is a whole body syndrome, and I'm talking mainly about chronic stress or traumatic stress. And one thing we showed almost over 15 years ago now, we showed that in animal models that stress in early life leads to changes in the brain, in behavior, in the immune system, in pain responses, in neurotransmitters that we have in our brains. And so we were getting this whole body effect of early life stress that endures the whole way through adulthood. And we know that patients with depression, for example, are more likely to have early life stress in their history as well. And understanding how early life trauma can lead to these negative outcomes is really important. But one of the things that a graduate student at the time, and she's now on faculty in Cork, Siobhan O'Mahony, discovered at the time was that there was a reduction in the composition of the microbes in the gut in these same animals. And that could have been a complete artifact. It could have been just one of these things. But we started like, stress is affecting the microbiome. And then we did studies in animals that grew up without microbes, and they have an exaggerated response to stress. So that tells us that the microbes are regulating stress. Microbes are regulating stress, stress is affecting the microbes. Then it led us to the next part. Could we target the microbes to alleviate some of the effects? Now, this is in animals, and we did this, and we showed that a number of strains of bacteria, particularly lactobacilli and bifidobacteria, were having anti-stress effects in animal models, and we showed that this was dependent on a nerve called the vagus nerve. So we're now getting biology behind it. So this was really exciting. This is about 2011, 2012. We then started showing that if you grow up without these microbes, key processes in the brain are not working properly, whether it's myelination or the birth of new brain cells. So we started building a whole repertoire of evidence that the microbes in early life in particular are very important for how the stress brain deals with it. And that led us to then thinking, well, let's jump to humans and let's see, can we now look at any of this in humans? And perhaps one of the most exciting times for me was when we did a small study in healthy people, and we took a strain of bacteria that we had shown in animals had anti-stress effects and buffered some of the effects of stress, and we gave it to people, and we bring them into the lab and we stress them ethically in the lab by putting them in front of very grumpy looking people, and they have to pitch their dream job, and we're measuring this is a stressful experience. Yeah. And we showed that if they'd taken this bacteria, they didn't have the stress response.
Wow.
So it's all connected. And
so it has now come into, you're studying humans.
Yes. Okay. So about 1/3 of my lab now is focused on the human and trying to understand the relative contribution of the microbes to some of these findings. And it's been quite exciting, and we have a long way to go, but we're on that journey.
That's what I was coming.
Yeah, and it's a great question, and I think we're at the cusp of trying to understand this really. I mean, of course, there's an awful lot of innovation in this space, and so it's really important to see that there's quite a number of startup companies and people trying to look at developing novel strategies for microbes, for what the microbes make, which are these metabolites. So that's also potential. Then can we feed the microbes through various dietary substances that could be harnessed in that way? And but the critical part is getting the data that is going to actually work. And so we did a small study. It got hit by COVID, so it's 45 people. But again, we took people with relatively poor diets that were stress sensitive, so our student population, and we decided, let's feed our microbes with fiber, because microbes love fiber, and also let's boost our microbe population with fermented foods. So these are two old dietary strategies, not expensive, don't have to be expensive, although there are many products in the field as well. And we found that individuals that had taken a diet rich in fiber and fermented foods for 1 month, that their ability to deal with stress was better, and their perceived stress response was better. So that was kind of a really nice finding. So that's something I can tell people today to start to implement. We're doing longer studies right now. We're going out to 8 weeks, and we're looking at, is it the fiber, is it the fermented food, or do you need both? And trying to mix that. And these studies are ongoing.
Yeah, and anyway, I mean, fiber and fermented food in your diet is anyway a good thing. So now we know that it can help us feel better.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of what we're trying to say.
Yeah.
And it helps to democratize, because it doesn't mean you have to spend a fortune to support your brain health.
Can you talk a little more about how do we empower our gut? Okay, you said food. There are tons of medicines available, probiotic, prebiotic. Those are good enough? And are there any tests one can do?
I would caution always from the beginning. We need to have data, and this, for the everyday person, this can get a bit frustrating, because some people today can't wait for all the studies to be done, and so, but there are things we can tell people to do. So from a diet perspective, there are things we can tell people to add to their diet. So getting that fiber fermented food, but also color. The color in your diet is really, because the color is coming from chemicals called polyphenols, which are really good for our microbes. Our microbes love them, and they break them down to other good chemicals. So color, diversity in your diet is really important. Not too much of anything overall, but lots of fiber is as much as you can tolerate, and a lot of that comes from plants, which is very good. So they're the things you can, and also we know omega-3 fatty acids are good for our microbes. So there's a whole raft of things that we see are good for our microbes. And then there are the things we can tell people don't, or try and avoid. Like processed food, especially ultra-processed food, because of the sweeteners and the emulsifiers and other components, which we have evidence now are actually really bad for your microbes overall. We know also that in early life that breastfeeding is really good for the microbes, and really good. And so that's another advice, if we can, if people can do that and it supports it, that's what we do. Try and avoid cesarean sections. That's another thing that we know is bad for our microbes. Try and not get too much jet lag. I'm here, and so sleep and the microbes are very closely intertwined, and we're really studying this, how circadian rhythms, the microbes and stress are forming this really important axis in our body to keeping our overall well-being. But other things that I reluctantly told my family is that having a pet, having a dog, is good for your microbial diversity.
Really?
Yeah. So these are some of the things.
Is that something that you sort of? How does the dog help?
So dogs bring and help spread in more diversity in the microbes.
Oh.
So now I've seen there's more empirical data being done now to try and understand that how much is pet ownership contributing, or is it living in a green environment, and all of these things are really important. But we can, we can tell people before they have to wait, what they're doing. In relation to testing, we're still at early days. There was a recent consensus statement that I was involved in on these over-the-counter type tests, and really we're not there yet in terms of offering anything clinically available. And it's a pity, because I think there's a hunger, an appetite among the population for people to get that.
Some companies still do that microbiome test.
And as long as people are understanding what the limitations are, annotations are, and what they're comparing with, and everyone's microbiome is different, and so understanding that, and that your microbiome it gives you an index of how your microbes are today, and how you are when you're well. I think over time we'll start people to chart that and look at them as they go through different illnesses, and we can do that. And then there's innovations going on in development of things like smart toilets, where people can actually get their microbiome assessed from their poop straight away. Also smart pills where people can swallow. This is where a lot of the innovation is going, that some of your business readers might be interested in.
Yeah. So I'm sure our genes dictate what our microbiome is. But of course a lifestyle too. So that's something like microbiomes too. Like, do we inherit our microbiomes, and how much is it epigenetic? How much is
Brilliant question, really great question. I mean, but of course there's no simple answer to this. Yeah. But we get our microbes for the most part from our mums. as a kind of a birthday present on the day we're born. So we're thought to be sterile in utero, and as we're born, we get exposed to the mum's microbes, and these microbes start to inform the developing immune system straight away, that millisecond at birth. And these start to, the laying down of these is really important, and then that's why we know factors like antibiotic use and prematurity and cesarean delivery all change that, because they're not getting it. So and then the environment starts to kick in and really start to influence. But in early life, the maternal microbiota coupled with feeding, whether you're breastfed or not, dictates a lot of what's there. And then we start getting environmental influences overall. In terms of genetics, what genes really influences, they influence both the microbes, but to a small extent, but also they mainly influence the gut physiology. So they influence the villi, how that looks, that where the microbes reside. And so if you change where the microbes live, so it's like they influence the housing of the microbes more so than the actual microbes themselves.
Microbes has something to do with how
our genetics is made up, and which microbes are able to take up residence there or not overall.
Can you tell us a little bit about the book? Of course, you've talked about the research, and who is it for? Read it?
Anyone can read it. So this was a book, it's written by a journalist, Scott Anderson, together with my colleague Ted Dinan and I. So we came together to try and make it as accessible to the layperson as possible. Now Scott is American, so it's, there will be some Americanisms in it overall. The title is about a revolution. Our initial title was much more modest, but it goes with there. But it's really about trying to, and it's a few years old now, but it's everything in there is still valid, because it's really about trying to educate people in a way that is accessible, that people can feel they're on a journey from the mouth all the way through the gut, understanding where the microbes are playing a role and understanding where the gaps are, and also giving people advice about how to read a probiotic label, how to understand aspects of that. So real practical advice in there as well. And it is for everyone. It's in English, Chinese, Polish and Spanish at the moment.
Thank you so much.
It's a real pleasure.